Welcome back to another episode. The San Francisco Giants have released JD Davis. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that he's no longer a Giant. Now, the way we got to this point, I think that's where it's a little bit shocking. We're going to kind of dive in on this because anybody that's kind of been on any kind of social media today or has been kind of reading around, there's a lot of different takes and a lot of different viewpoints on this one, especially. This has been kind of an interesting almost meltdown on various sites where a lot of people think the Giants did Davis dirty. A lot don't see any issue about it, aren't really shedding any tears for JD in this case. As the saying goes, there's always two sides to every story. So we're going to kind of look at that and kind of go over my thoughts on the whole process. Um, for those that aren't aware, though, Giants did place him on waivers a couple days ago. Nobody claimed him to take on his full $6.9 million salary. And because of now, some people are calling a loophole in the CBA. It's not a loophole. The fact is it's been cut and dry, verbiage in the CBA for years, just because it's not used, hardly ever. Todd Walker was the last person that this happened to, and that was in 2007 with the Padres. Um, but the Giants did expose verbiage in the CBA that allows them to outright release JD Davis, and they have to give him, quote, termination pay. So instead of having to owe him his $6.9 million salary, they're only having to pay him $1.1 million, which at the end of the day, I'm not really going to shed any tears for a guy that's getting paid $1.1 million to go away. But there is the question of, was he done dirty in this sense, or in this case? But kind of as both sides have been saying, JD Davis's agent has come out and said that, they're not negotiating good faith. He's never seen anything like this. They submitted one offer very close to the deadline, which I totally understand. Now, on the flip side of that, that is a negotiation tactic for teams where it puts pressure on them to either accept the money or go to a hearing. And the Giants do have a policy of once they file, they don't negotiate any longer. It goes to the hearing. So they haven't really had to go to the arbitration hearings very often, but JD Davis did not accept, so they went to the hearing. Now, Farhan, what he has come out and said, now, I'm not a big Farhan supporter. He's got a little bit too much used car salesman in him for me. He always kind of feels like he's only telling half truths or just outright lying. But what Farhan came out and said is that they offered him just under $6.4 million, and Davis didn't even give Davis and his agent didn't even give a counter offer. They just said it has to be something that starts with a 7. So, had they started the process earlier, could they have maybe come to an agreement on something? Maybe, but they didn't, and they went to arbitration. Now, had JD Davis accepted that and they came to an agreement on it, his money would have been fully guaranteed. So, because of that, that is also a failure on his agent's part. Like, the reality is the agents know the rules of the CBA. And if they don't know the rules of the CBA, then players should not be lining up to have those agents as their agents. So yeah, he chased several $100,000 more, but it ran the risk of a guy, basically having a non-guaranteed contract, which there aren't many of those in baseball. Now, a lot of people I've seen saying, "Oh, you would have had to have incredible foresight to know that something like this could have happened." The Giants have been connected to Matt Chapman since November. I think that anybody that took 10 seconds to look at their roster could have told you months ago that if they signed Matt Chapman, there just simply wasn't a place for JD Davis due to the math. The Giants, in theory, could keep 14 position players versus 13, but it doesn't make sense to do that because you're just going to run through your bullpen super fast and your pitching staff and wear them out. So you're going to carry 13 pitchers. It just does not make sense not to. So In theory they could, but really anybody looking at the math could tell there's not a place for JD Davis to coexist on the roster with Matt Chapman and Wilmer Flores. So this has been a possibility for a long time, something like this happening. So I don't think it really should have taken that much foresight. Now, maybe people thought they could get a trade off, maybe whatever. And the Giants could have eaten money, but I'm sorry, like I get the whole, oh, you want to act out of good faith, but on the flip side, it is a business and this is the prudent move for them to make. But that does bring us to the next part. Is this creating a bad reputation for the Giants, and is this going to affect their ability to sign players in the future? Um, to an extent, yes, it is creating a bad kind of image. Farhan has taken his fair share of PR hits the last week or two between the Brandon Crawford situation, the JD Davis situation. I know especially Giants fans around the league are not super fond about the way he operates and his lack of communication. He didn't communicate with Crawford when they tried to sign Correa last season. They didn't communicate well with Crawford letting him go this offseason. Although I think anybody that watched the way they brought him back for one game in the season finale to get him his standing ovation, it was crystal clear he was gone. I mean, Crawford's got his pride, and I understand he might have felt hurt, but I think anybody should have known that he was gone when he had his family throwing out the first pitch and everything. They made it basically Brandon Crawford Day. So I don't feel as bad on that one. But and then they signed Chapman with no communication for JD, which my response to that is, maybe Crawford can have a gripe, but JD Davis, like, you're not a legend in San Francisco. They don't owe you anything. So yeah, he does have a history of not having great communication, and I'm not a fan of that personally. But on the flip side, like, this isn't really going to hurt them signing free agents. Just like last year's Carlos Correa situation where Scott Boras tried to villainize the Giants over backing out of that deal, and then the Mets did the same thing, and he tried to villainize the Mets on that. Well, guess what? Now they've signed 2 Scott Boras free agents this offseason, including and then also Conforto and Mania last offseason. So it's not like they suddenly couldn't do business with Scott Boras. This isn't going to cause the Giants to no longer be able to get mid-tier free agents, and the big free agents aren't going to care about that because at the end of the day, money talks, and what walks. So I just don't see this being that massive of a problem in that respect. Now, it'll probably be really forgotten about in like 2 or 3 weeks. Like it'll get brought up occasionally. Anytime we see JD Davis, it's going to be like, oh, the Giants did him dirty. But at the end of the day, like, free agents are going to be talking about this next offseason. The players in the clubhouse, a lot of them know how well they get treated by the ownership and by the front office and everyone. Even though we don't all agree with the way they do business, it's not going to be that as big of a deal as people are making it out on different social media sites. So it's kind of where I fall on that. I'm not a fan of the way they did it, but at the end of the day, like, I understand why they did what they did, and other teams clearly did not value JD Davis at $6.9 million because if somebody did, they would not have risked him hitting free agency and being able to sign with another team if they thought he was worth $6.9 million. They would have just claimed him off waivers and taken him at the salary. And that to me tells more than anything on how he is valued around the league. It's just plain and simple. So, kind of a lot to dislike and like both sides, but just wanted to give my thoughts on his situation. We'll see kind of what happens going forward. Tomorrow's game is going to be televised versus the Dodgers, who, we'll see who all plays in that game for the Dodgers. I know Glasnow is pitching. I expect a lot of the Giants starters to play in that game because if you looked at today's lineup, it was basically Lee, and then a bunch of he was a starter, obviously, and a bunch of actually, no, I don't think Lee played today. It was Fitzgerald, Matos, Bart, Schmidt, um, a lot of kids, basically. A lot of guys that aren't going to be playing, or in many cases aren't even going to be on the roster probably. So tomorrow I anticipate it's going to be a lot of the starters. You're going to have, Conforto, Soler, Lee, Tyro, all those guys. Bailey will probably play. You're going to see their starting lineup, so to speak. Capman will be out there. So we'll see how the game goes. It's cool that it'll be televised, though. We'll get to watch that. Other than that, if you guys like the material, as always, like, subscribe, comment, everything. I enjoy interacting with all of you. I know we don't always agree, but I enjoy the debate in the comments. That's half the reason I created this show. It's fun to interact with everybody. So I appreciate the support. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and we'll catch you all tomorrow.